Hello and welcome back to the Book of Psalms. Today we're going to be reading Psalms 15 to 17. And it's a short reading today, but there are still some things that we really should take notice of. So let's start right in with Psalm 15. David is asking the Lord who can dwell with him. And by him I mean the Lord. Who can dwell with the Lord? What he's going to do here in this psalm is really outline the character qualifications of people that are going to be able to dwell with him. So who is able to dwell with the Lord? Well, here are some of those qualifications that he lays out. One is the one who lives blamelessly, practices righteousness, and acknowledges the truth. It's not enough to just say that you love God or to serve God. You actually need to live a life of integrity. And that's what we see here in this passage. To highlight a couple more aspects of the righteous life that David mentions, they take care for their neighbors and they despise those who do evil. They honor those who fear God and they keep their word whatever the cost. I think we all know what integrity is, and David is basically saying that if you want to dwell with the Lord, that you need to live a life of integrity. He wraps it up by saying, if you do these things, you will never be moved. We won't be shaken by the world if we follow the Lord. So what does it take to dwell with the Lord? It takes a person of character, a person of integrity, and somebody that's consistent, somebody that is truly seeking to serve God, truly seeking to know God and to love God, and not somebody that's just pretending, not somebody that just speaks the Christianese. They say the right things on Sundays and they show up and they look good, they look the part. It means that you actually live it, that every part of your life is lived for the Lord. It means that you live a life of integrity, and those are the type of people that are able to dwell with the Lord. And then that brings us into chapter 16. Or not really chapter 16. It's not really chapter 16, it's Psalm 16. In this psalm, David rejoices in the Lord and talks about the blessings of following him. This psalm also prophesies of the relationship between the Messiah and God the Father. So that is, of course, Jesus and his Father, who is God the Father. In this first couple verses, David tells us that God is his refuge, and in the difficult times, he knows that God is all he has and all that he needs. He goes on to talk about how he delights in the Lord and his people. The people that were important to God were also important to David. In verses 7 and 8, we see that David is grateful to take refuge in God's presence. He says that God counsels, instructs, and guides him in the difficult periods of his life. We should be like him as we are called to remain in Christ. If we do that, we experience stability in this uncertain life. In fact, the more difficult our lives get, the closer we should get to Christ because we need him all the more. And in the end, here David just trusts that God isn't going to abandon him and that in the end he will have joy in eternity in the presence of the Lord. And that's another lesson and a message that we can take from this psalm, because how many of us have been in situations where it feels like we're all alone, where maybe we know that God hasn't left us, but we can't feel him. We can't feel his presence. We don't feel that joy and that peace that God promises to give, and it just feels like, God, where are you? And that's kind of where David is back and forth here. And David, of course, we remember he was God's chosen one. He's known as a man after God's own heart. He was God's chosen king for his people. But then, all of a sudden, David, his son, wants to take his throne, and instead of just killing his son, because why would he want to do that? He loves his son, and he's on the run. And even before that, he was running from Saul. So David has had a lot of parts of his life where he really hasn't done anything wrong to deserve things that are happening to him, but they're happening nonetheless. But David has trust and he has faith in the promise that the Lord has given, and he trusts that the eternity he spends will be so much greater than anything he's having to deal with now. And that's something that we as Christians and as believers have to look forward to. And then we have chapter 17, or again, Psalm 17. Here David speaks of his sincere attempt to live a godly life and asks God to hear his prayer and protect him from his enemies. He starts off by petitioning God to hear and respond to his prayer. He was confident that he hasn't done anything that should keep him from God, or from God's presence, and he hasn't done anything that should keep God from answering his prayer. He wants God to reveal his love to him, as we see there in verse 7, and then he asks God to protect him from those who are out to get him. David's enemies are surrounding him, so he needs God to cover him. He wraps up this message by telling us how he looks forward to seeing the face of the Lord. The wicked are reaping the benefits of this world, but David remains confident in God. He wants to see God's judgment on his enemies, but more than that, David finds satisfaction in the presence of the Lord. And that's something else that we can really take a lot from, because just that last little portion there, the wicked are reaping the benefits of this world. That's easy to see. It's easy to see that the people that aren't following God, that maybe aren't necessarily the most moral or the best people, seem to be getting all the rewards in this life. But that's not something we should worry about, because the presence of the Lord should satisfy us, just as it did with David. And even when it feels like the bad people just keep getting all the good things coming their way, and things just appear to be getting worse and worse, and we don't understand why God's letting it happen, we need to find satisfaction in his presence. And how do you do it? You look back to chapter 15. How do you dwell in the presence of the Lord? You live a life of integrity, and you'll be able to dwell with the Lord and experience him in our lives. And that's all for today. I'll see you tomorrow back here in the book of Job.